Welcome to Pencil Leadership. I'm Chris Anderson, success and lifestyle entrepreneur, and I'm on a mission to help you realize your full potential so you can leave a positive mark on the world. So if you're ready, take out your pencils and let's begin. And if you want to make a difference in the lives of others, share this episode, go over to Apple Podcasts and follow us there to leave a positive rating and review. And together we can leave a bigger positive mark on the world. All right, welcome back to another recording of Pencil Leadership. I am Chris, your host. And like always, we are super blessed with the guests that we get to have on the show. And today is no different. This episode is no different. And you all are in for a treat. We have Todd Randall on the show with us today. He's an 8-time, let's repeat that, 8-time CEO and business coach. So he's built 8 businesses, 4 which he's still managing, 3 he was able to successfully exit, which is another thing we need to successfully exit. So That's huge going forward. He's generated millions of dollars through that. And he continues to go when he could retire. And he's built the life that he really loves. He gets to play polo and fly to different countries, all while remotely controlling and managing his businesses. So we're super excited to have him on the show today. Todd, welcome to Pencil Leadership.
Hey, thanks for having me, Chris. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. And we're excited to learn from you. I know I am being early on in my entrepreneurial journey. And so we're definitely excited to pick your brain and just learn from you really how to kind of have that harmony with business and life and why that's important to have business. But before we kind of dive into all that, would love for you just to share high level a little bit about yourself and what it is you do.
Yeah, I mean, what better person to learn from than someone who's failed in every possible conceivable way, right? That's what makes me special and unique, I guess. I'm an interesting case for an entrepreneur because I was not a person who had a great idea. I didn't invent something. A lot of my friends who became entrepreneurs, they were working for a big company that was kind of dismissing their product or just, dismissing their division. And they stepped up and said, hey, I believe in this product or I believe in this division. I'll get some investors and, spin it out. And I wasn't one of those people. I just didn't have a great idea. But I've always fancied business. I thought it was fun. I did paper routes and, network marketing and things when I was young to experiment with it. And I just didn't have a good idea. So I went to business. And I was in the corporate world for nearly 20 years before I had the courage to start on my own. And eventually what I decided, and I hope that this is a revelation to some of your listeners, is that I didn't need a great idea. There are lots of ways to start business without a great idea because business is essentially just finding something of value and transacting with the folks who need it. And so you can just be a middleman or you can take someone else's idea. And those are perfectly valid reasons to start a business. The world needs those people or there wouldn't be opportunities for that.
Yeah. And I think that's huge. That's how you started just, that you failed in every conceivable way. I think that's good to, again, just realize that we're going to mess up. We're not going to be perfect. We're going to have mistakes. We're going to learn and grow from, because it's this part. And I realize that so much just from everything I've learned just early with so little time I've been into it. But yeah, with that, why you talk about, the benefit and now you get to have, do your polo and fly across the country and everything like that. But starting a business, why do you love it so much? Why did you really dive into it and how can we do that ourselves?
Yeah. One of the reasons I talk about that lifestyle piece in pre-interviews or when I get to know people like you and I did, is just because it represents my dream. And, horses or polo is not everyone's dream. It's not yours or a lot of your listeners. That's not the point. In fact, some people would think polo would be a stupid, pursuit. For me, I was just, let me tell the story because I think it fuels the fire a little bit. I was born on a dairy farm in the middle of nowhere. And it's something my parents and my grandparents really loved. They were super proud of being a 3rd or 4th generation dairy farm. And we had all kinds of livestock around in it. And then my parents both went to college and I, craved sophistication. I wanted to live in big cities. I wanted to, study, obtuse subjects. And I wanted to become a clinician. Oh my gosh, how more sophisticated could you become? And I exited that lifestyle. And so I did that and I traveled the world and worked for big companies. And then eventually, as happens with many people, I just missed my roots. I missed what made me a country boy again.
Mhm.
I felt like I was too distant from that, and I didn't, my family kind of didn't understand me as well as they used to, and so I wanted to get back to that, but I didn't want to, raise a garden
Mm.
or milk cows. And a friend of mine, rode horses for pleasure, and they introduced me to polo, and it was immediate for me. I'm like, this is, it's athletic, it's cool, it's hard work, it's a sport, and I've always been an athlete. So for me, those things came together. And I said, well, this is a really hard sport to learn, and it requires land, and it can be very expensive depending on how you enter it, right? And so I decided, no, I'm going to make this my thing. This will be my goal. Everyone has a goal. And it seemed big and hairy and audacious at the time, but isn't that the greatest kind of goal there is?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's why I said it. I was pretty deliberate about it. I said, I'm going to design my life in such a way that I can do this. And that means I'm going to have to make sacrifices. And if there's any one piece, I know when we get on calls like this, the reason that people subscribe is they hope for little tidbits, pieces of wisdom that if I was 20 years younger, I wish that I'd had. And
Right.
for me, the revelation to build a life around what I wanted took a really, really long time. And I just hope that young entrepreneurs don't have to take as long, because they can be so much more focused on doing what they want to.
Yeah, I think that's crucial. And, that's kind of like what brought me down my path. It was, I wanted something different with my life and for, my future family and things like that. And big dreams of, I love animals too, and country. I'm from Indiana, so country boy kind of at heart, and big goals with that. And so, but when we get into this entrepreneur journey, starting businesses and stuff, it's not for the faint of heart, really. There's a lot of things we've got to learn and navigate and traverse ups and downs. And I think a lot of people don't realize just, building business is mechanical, and a lot of it comes with goes back to our mindset and how we see things and approach things. But there's just a lot to it. So I guess where can we start with all that?
Yeah. So here's let's use part of my journey as a lesson, right? Because I was almost 40 years old, and I was kind of a mid-level executive for a really big company, right? And like I told you, I didn't have any bright ideas, but I started looking around at other people that were business people, and I saw, my dry cleaner. This family who all was in it, and they worked 1 million hours a day, but it was their business, and they were really proud of it. You could tell they took care of the place, and they remembered everyone by name, et cetera. I had a friend who owned a franchise, a guy I played volleyball with, and he was a bureaucrat at Intel and ran all over the world doing stuff with him. And he changed his lifestyle by opening a franchise. And I thought that was beneath me, because a franchise was someone else's idea. It's not mine, right? And when I did the research, I realized, that may be a great way for someone to start a business, because essentially you're licensing a brand from someone, and then you get to put your stamp on it. You get to hire the folks, you get to offer customer service, you get to decide if you have company ethics or not, right? You get to decide if it's really successful, and you get to decide if it's if it's not. And so that's the way that I started. Actually, I bought the rights to a franchise and built a spa.
Cool.
And the lesson there for me, I think, was that I knew that I was ready to bail from my corporate gig. I knew I was ready to do my own thing. I'd had my own crucible and the revelations that came from that. And I had already, decided that sacrifice was an okay part of that journey. And it only took me about 18 months of research to find a business that I thought would be really fun. Like, I was a clinician. I'm a pharmacist by trade.
Okay.
And I'd worked in lots of hospitals and doctors' offices, et cetera. And I opened a kind of a massage therapy spa. And it felt like healthcare to me, because people come in, and they walk out a better person, like a whole, there's a wellness element to it. And it's built like a doctor's office. You just, have massage therapists instead of physicians or physical therapists or what have you. And that model was similar enough to me that I could really get into it.
Cool.
Right.
So, and I like that too, because, a lot of times people think starting a business is, bootstrapping something complete, like their own idea, like you said. It doesn't have to be that way. So I think that's a good thing
to be that way.
People to realize, like, there's a lot of options out there.
Yeah. And I have started my own ideas too. And they've been less successful because it's a little harder row to hoe. Right. If you come up with a cool idea and you start building something, other folks may have had that idea at the same time. Other folks may have that idea later, but they have some kind of leverage that you don't. And it's a little more competitive environment. So I just started with one business that, was kind of I would say a moderate risk, but a higher confidence. Because I'd seen it work before with other folks. And all kinds of businesses around the world need that. They need someone who's local who will set up a business with either their brand or their transaction processing or what have you. Think about a newspaper route.
Yeah.
Right.
That's true. Yeah.
You're not inventing newspapers.
Right. Yeah.
Right. But it is a business, and you have customer service, and you have, you requires capital. Sometimes you might need to buy a bike for it, but any business is okay to start because all the tools you need will be learned in process. Like I was a pharmacist, so I had these skills that were not relatable. Right.
Right.
I went and got an MBA because I was afraid, not because any of the skills I learned there helped me run a business.
Yeah.
That was just a confidence builder. I was literally nothing I built there that helped me run my first business. However, once I got in it, I banged my head against the wall over and over and over again until I learned the lessons. And I think was one of the big takeaways for me is that running a business is a series of skills that I hadn't practiced before. And it can be learned.
Yeah. What were some of those biggest skills?
Management, people management.
Yeah.
Like I had managed teams before in a corporate environment, but I'd managed them with help of HR. I'd managed them with help with some interview process, and I'd managed them with some kind of ethics, bookends already designed for me. And to do all that from scratch is not only fun, but it's also scary as heck because you're starting from scratch in that. So I think the people management is a big one. Capital management is one that doesn't get enough respect. I think starting a business does require capital. And the first place you get capital when you start a business is anywhere you can.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. This is something that investors do not talk about. I went to all my private equity, muckety mucks and said, hey, I'm starting a business. How do I do it? And they had all these great ideas about shared partnerships and banking relationships and investors and all that jazz. But nobody's interested in a first-time business owner.
Right.
Nobody wants to give you, first level and second level and mezzanine and all that jazz. The most likely place that people get money when they start their first business is their 401ks and their family members.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. And I recommend it. I think that if you're into it, you should get money from wherever you can. The more businesses you have and the more experience you have, the more options you have.
Right. Yeah. Because you think most investors or things like that, they're wanting, 2 years tax information so they can show. So it's like, okay, it's almost like when people come out of college looking for a job. Oh yeah, you need to have a year experience, but it's entry level. But how am I supposed to get that? So it's the same kind of, I feel like, with business capital. Yeah.
No matter what kind of loan someone gives, here's a lesson. Here's a tip. Right? No matter what kind of debt someone gives you as a startup investor, whether it's, as a VC or what have you, it's almost always a real estate loan. No matter who you talk to, their first question is, what real estate do you have? Because they're just looking for any safety at all. Yeah. Business owners are very high risk. And so the person giving you the money just wants to know how they're going to protect themselves if things go belly up. And they often do.
You love listening to podcasts, but have you ever thought about starting your own podcast? Maybe you want to build a brand, grow your business, or are looking for an excuse to talk about your favorite hobby. Whatever your reason for making a podcast, Buzzsprout is the place to start. Since 2009, Buzzsprout has helped over 300,000 people launch their own podcasts. Buzzsprout walks you step by step through the whole process and will give you powerful tools to start, grow, and monetize your podcast. Ready to get started? Click the link in the show notes to get our free step-by-step guide to starting your podcast today.
Yeah. I think, and that's something I'm looking at. Like when I started my business, I didn't have any capital. I didn't really reach out. So it's almost like self-funded and, really, really bootstrapping. And so like learning that lesson, I've been trying to leverage a little bit more now, and, trying to get into a real estate game as well right now. I'm like, okay, well, I need to utilize other people's money, investors into this. And, of course they get the percentage back or whatever, but I even find even with that, it's hard to find investors.
This is something that investors don't tell you early in the
Yeah.
game. Because if you talk to people to invest a lot, they'll ask you a lot of obscure, obtuse questions, right? Like, what's the internal rate of return? Do you have a hurdle rate? What's the exit strategy? And to a new business owner, those are foreign concepts and nearly irrelevant.
Yeah.
Because you, as a business owner, if you really want to start a business, the first business you start is the first business you can start. Like whatever business you can. And if that's a paper route, that's a paper route.
Right.
And if that's, buying on Amazon and reselling on eBay, then that's the business that you start. And I recommend it. I think people should just get moving and do anything at all. And then once you have a little bit of experience, then you'll notice people will come out of the woodwork and say, you did what?
Yeah.
You've traded, baseball cards for the last 2 years and you made $13,000 in profit on that.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Okay. Right. They start to take you seriously because you hustled.
Yeah. But you still have to get out there. I mean, and connect with these people. How do you find these type of people like who possibly can invest? Like, how do you know who the right people are to connect with?
Yeah. Honestly, I don't recommend it.
Okay.
My recommendation for a small business owner is to be 100% owner as long as you can. Now,
Gotcha.
If you're in a software play, that's different because there are companies whose full-time job it is to find software companies, because the multiples, like when you find somebody who's built something, the multiple of moving up levels is crazy high.
Yeah.
But for most other businesses in the world where, an average exit would be 2, 3, 4, 5 times, profits. For those folks, I say start small, start with the money that you have, or start on contingencies. Like there's some businesses that you can borrow from your suppliers, et cetera. Okay. That's one that people don't use maybe as often as they might. Like if you build snowboards and resin is your most, expensive material, you may want to go to them and say, hey, I have this great design for a new snowboard. Do you want to see it? And get them fired up about it. And then say, here's what I need. I need $7,500 worth of resin over the first month. And I'm going to get $12,000 in revenue in return for that. And so all I need 45 days terms from you.
Okay. Interesting. No, that's something, I wouldn't even thought about with a product like that to do.
Yep. So you can be creative, but I really recommend, I think starting small and being profitable soon is a much better strategy than getting a bunch of money and wondering if you're ever going to make it.
Right. Yeah.
Unless you're in software. Software is a whole different beast.
Gotcha. So, if we're going about that and, building it and, everything comes with it, how, like for some people listening, how do we get that? Is it even possible to have a harmony in life and business once you're starting out, or is it just all business? Like,
I have bad news for you, Chris.
Yeah.
The answer is no early.
Yeah.
The answer is no early because it's such a high failure rate that you have to be super committed in terms of time and energy just to get over, the first critical thresholds. However, once you have a business started, right, and once you have systems in place, et cetera, then I think even early on, it does behoove you to start building systems so you can distance yourself from that individual business so you can start scaling in a meaningful way. This is my greatest accomplishment. It's my superpower, the power to delegate, because I had the first business I had, I did everything. I built it. I decorated it. I cleaned it. I sold the memberships. I managed the staff. I hired everybody. I did all the practicals. I did payroll and everything. And a year later, I was really proud that I'd started my first business. I really was. But I wasn't doing anything else except running it.
Right.
And I thought that all the decisions needed to be made by me because I was the owner, which was a mistake. At the time, it seemed relevant because I was using my judgment for so much of it. But I quickly learned that things weren't actually getting done because everyone was waiting me to make my damn mind up. Right. And so my staff started to put some pressure on me. And so what I did is I trusted one of them. I'll never forget. This is one of my favorite work relationships ever. Carolina came to me and she said, things aren't getting done around here because I have to offload so much of it to you. I can do more. Can you trust me? And let's work through a
Hmm.
process. And so we worked for years. Like we failed miserably. It was a catastrophe, us trying to work this out because we didn't have a system. And we worked and practiced and worked and practiced and refined. And at the end of a couple of years later, we had a 5-step process that we've used in all the other businesses we ran together. And there was a time where she was running all my businesses and she was using this process with her managers so that they could delegate properly. And what ended up happening is that first business, let's say I was making 100 units of whatever. Imagine your currency, imagine your timeline, 100 units. And I was really proud of that. Once I started delegating things, the decisions were actually not quite as efficient, right? Because people making decisions weren't as experienced as I was making those decisions. So let's say in the end that we sacrificed some profit and we're only making 80 units now per imaginary use of time, unit of time, right? Which is a 20% drop. However, with the extra time that I had, I went and I negotiated a second location. Right.
Okay.
So now I've almost doubled the revenue of our business and 1.5 or 1.6 times our profit as a result of having the time to be able to scale.
Yeah.
Right. And so the question you have to ask yourself is, do you want to live in misery and be proud of the 100% that you have? Or do you want to learn the tools to step away, give other people some room, right? Learn the skills that it takes to delegate properly and, profit 1.6 or 2. And have time to play volleyball on the beach with your friends.
Yeah. And that's obviously, that's, I think what a lot of people hopefully are working towards. I know, I am, but how do we, I know you mentioned systems there a lot, that those were important. And then, delegation. So systems, are there any particular systems that, someone starting out should implement sooner rather than later? And then we can talk about the delegation aspect.
Yeah, not systems, but from the people perspective.
Okay.
Like when I first started, I was really sensitive to expenses. And I think all business owners should be, right? I did absolutely everything that I could in hopes of saving a buck somewhere. And where it gets into trouble, I think sometimes, is if you skimp on staff.
Okay.
Not all staff, right? There's some positions that you are like extremely replaceable to them. They're working for you this month, and if they get anything else that's more interesting, flavor of the week, they'll bail. Don't invest in those people if they're not going to return it. But there are some people that will be noteworthy in the beginning, and those folks, invest in them. Like, you need partners if you're going to run a good business. People you trust, people that will exercise judgment, people who respect your position and want to make decisions on your behalf. And in those folks, I probably was too cheap for too long. I could have invested more in my key staff early.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. But so when in the process are we able to delegate? I mean, you obviously starting out bootstrapping, you're not going to necessarily have the funds. Or do you work with people on, let's do this together until we can pay you kind of thing? Like, what's that look like from your perspective?
Yeah, I'd say you should. It depends on your tolerance for chaos. And it depends on what your confidence of your timeline is. For me, I needed to run the business and know how everything worked before I was willing to delegate. Yeah. Because I could teach. Like we always said, don't delegate until you have the time to do it proper, because it ends up being just one emergency after another of poor judgment. And it's not necessarily poor judgment. It's just judgment that's different than yours. And so it takes you by surprise. Oh, I wouldn't have done that. It's not aligned with my principles or what have you. Right. So I think you should delegate only when 3 conditions exist. The first condition is if someone in your organization can do it better than you. That's an easy one. If you recognize it, I think sometimes it takes a little courage to give something away. But I'll tell you, some of the girls that worked in my gyms were so much better at social media than I can ever be. They enjoyed it. They were on it all the time. They knew all the tricks and the reels and stuff. And once I realized that they were invested, there's no reason for me to be on social media. They're just better at it than I am. So I let it all go. And in the end, I became ignorant of social media, and that's okay. Yeah. Right. Because I had other things to worry about, and I became good at the things I was good at. And if those staff moved on for whatever reason, then I just invested in other resources that were better at social media than I was.
For sure. No, that's a good point.
Yeah. The second criteria is if there's something that you really don't need to do.
Mm.
And this is a hard one for young entrepreneurs to recognize because it seems like everything is required by me. I don't know. Do you run into this yourself?
Somewhat, yeah.
Yeah. I think a lot of entrepreneurs, some of my clients complain about this, that they can't possibly hand off payroll,
Mm.
for instance, right? And I'm like, yeah, that's an important one. Let's make the whole list and maybe we keep payroll, right?
Yeah.
But if your list is really this long and if you're really this overwhelmed, you can hand off payroll. It can happen, right? You can put
Mm.
boundaries in place and you can put, transparency barriers in place, and you can limit, the risk, that can happen from such a transaction.
Mhm.
But it doesn't have to be you, right? And then the third criteria is if you have the time to transition thoroughly. I can't tell you the number of times. Oh, Carolina got so mad at me. I would send an email saying, starting on Tuesday, I'd like you to handle such and such from here on out. And she's like, yeah, handle it how? Big shot. Right? Like, what do you mean by that?
Yeah.
I'm gonna put purple ribbons on them and send them FedEx overnight. Is that what you had in mind? No, no, it's not what I had in
Right.
mind. Well, then let's handle it thoroughly.
Okay.
And so yeah, if you meet those three criteria, I think you should delegate as soon as it meets one of those three
Okay.
or all of them.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people, I talk to and stuff, the profit margin, trying to figure out the profit margin to be able to, facilitate all that delegation and things and get to a place to delegate.
Yeah.
But I think, having the processes too. So when you, like you said, kind of understanding it all so you can teach when you have someone come in, I think will help lessen that. And, there's a lot of different areas you could probably look for outsourcing.
Yeah, and that was just me. That was just my comfort level. To delegate takes an act of courage to delegate, because they're not going to do it the way you would have. That's very nature. We're all human beings and we're all distinctly different.
Yeah.
But if you build into your process some kind of tolerance for that, and if you allow it to meet the criteria before you delegate, then it can improve your comfort level with it, right? And for me, if I just knew how everything, how I wanted to do everything, it was just easier for me to teach it and delegate it.
Yeah.
And your comfort level might be different. Like I said, your tolerance for chaos, if it's great, then hand things off and let them do it a different way than you, and focus on something else.
For sure. So I have Pencil Leadership and then I have Elevate Media, and Elevate Media is, we edit podcasts and do post recording content creation from each video and stuff.
Yeah.
But being able to delegate those aspects of like the audio editing and the video creation was huge, because they can do it so much better than I can. Like I'm decent at it, but they just took it a whole nother level. And it was to be able to rely on them. There was a little bit of apprehension at the beginning, like, okay, is it gonna turn out, to the level that I'm hoping to, and things like that. And it surpassed it, thankfully. But it was that kind of same thing, like just allowing it to let go. Yeah.
This is a good time to look out for podcasts like yours, or to have mentors that are also entrepreneurs. It's important to network a little bit, just so you're surrounded by people who can give you ideas. I'll never forget when I was 30 years old or so, and I was working on this really big project and having a hard time making some decisions. And a friend of mine went to dinner, and he said that he was working for Arthur Andersen at the time and billing, say, $125 an hour. And he felt like that was really expensive because he's 30 years old, and $125 an hour is expensive to any 30-year-old, right? And so he was working on a big project for a client, and he spent 20 hours on it. And he thought, well, I could spend 10 more hours double checking my work, but I wouldn't want to pay, $1,200 for that. So I'm going to stop here. And he passed it up to the partner. Now, remember, the partners, he or she is charging $250 an hour for their time, right? And they spent 30 minutes on it and realized that, somebody should be spending 10 hours doing the work. And so they spent the whole weekend double checking the work, and they billed the client $2,500 when they could have billed them $1,250. And they had a kind of a come to Jesus about it, and he didn't understand. And she goes, well, what if I ran into something that required my boss, who bills at $1,000 an hour, to get involved?
Yeah.
and they spent 3 or 4 hours on it. Then you've created a catastrophe by not investing in the short term. And the lesson for me was early on in the process, find the folks
Oh,
who can invest the time.
lost you there for a second. Sorry, cut out.
Yep.
Your video did.
Sorry about that.
No, it's okay.
So my lesson was early in the process, find people that can invest the time to do thorough work and audit and monitor it. You may find that that's the most efficient way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So some folks are using, virtual assistants or interns or inexperienced people to do the first round of work. And then you can come in and spend 2 or 3 hours kind of auditing and monitoring and refining, as opposed to the 30 hours that they would have put in the first place.
Yeah, that's a good point and a good lesson, definitely to understand, because it's just it's just a process, and it's you learn stuff daily on the journey. And I think a key thing you said just a little bit ago is networking with other people, because like me getting to talk to you with all your experience and expertise there, like being able to learn from you is going to help me. And then hopefully I can give back to somebody else who's just starting with things I've learned in my own journey and from other people to help them. And so I think it's super important to just, to network and to be able to put yourself out there and learn and ask questions. That's one reason I started Pencil Leadership back when I started my business was
your tool. This is so valuable because I didn't have such a tool at the time. Whatever 20 years ago, when I was first starting to have these conversations, you had to physically go someplace, sit around a room and hand out business cards. And the fact that people can now turn on a YouTube channel and get all the entrepreneurs that you have on your show is ridiculously valuable to them.
Yeah. And, I've been thankful enough to have over 150 so far interviews. And it's just so much knowledge out there, and there's so much more, and just being able to connect with like-minded individuals and successful individuals. And I think it also gives us hope, like with us who are starting early or just starting or early on, like there's going to be ups and downs, but you can get through it and you can get to that point of success, whatever that looks like for you, whether it be being able to go play polo everywhere or, just have that time freedom at home. And so that's another thing to remember, I think, as you're going on this journey, like starting business. Yeah, it's going to be tough, but it's going to be worth it if you stick with it and continue to improve as you go.
Yeah, I didn't realize how valuable it was going to be on both fronts. Like when I did it, it was because I was unhappy and I was overworking. And I was willing to sacrifice some of the profits that I was making to have a little bit of balance. I wanted to, spend more time on the beach and get to the gym a little more often and spend time with my friends. And once I started delegating and removing myself from the business, my value to the business increased 2 or 3 or 4-fold.
Yeah.
Right. To be able to start a new location, renegotiate a license with a franchisor or a landlord, to come up with a new business idea, to start consulting. Like those were all things that really took my business to the next level. And it was the direct result of being able to delegate.
Yeah. Yeah. It's huge being able to do that, because like you said, you're into sports. I've been sports my whole life or most of it. And, teamwork makes the dream work, we hear. And so being able to create that and utilize other people's strengths that are stronger in different areas than we are, is going to help elevate your business to the next level. Yeah.
The two best sports analogies for business, in my opinion, are the teamwork analogy. Because, so much more gets done when the team is working in concert. Coach K is a great example of that. He puts a lot of young players on the field or on the court, and they get a lot more work done because of his experience as a coach creating a team. Right. And the other analogy that's perfect for business, I think, is long distance running. Because for me, remember, I was not a business runner. I was not a business owner. Sorry. But I just needed started to put miles on. I've met a lot of people in their 40s or 50s who've never ran a marathon before, and they thought, hey, this would be a neat accomplishment. And they do it. And you know how they do it? They go out and they walk a mile. And then the next time they walk and jog it. And next thing you know, they're jogging a whole mile, and then 2, and then 5. And next thing you know, they're running 26. And it doesn't take forever. They weren't skills that they had before, but you can learn it. And to me, that's what business is. It's a series of skills, fundamental business skills, that you can either, do one of a couple ways. You can just beat your head against the wall until you learn the lessons, or you can get help. You can watch podcasts or get a mentor or, read a book or what have you.
Yeah. And I love those analogies, because I use the running one all the time, because I have ran a handful of marathons, and it correlates so well. Just
Doesn't it?
Yeah, in so many different ways. And so, I think it all goes back to learning the skills and asking for help when needed, and kind of put your pride over to the side and reach out for that help, so you
Yeah.
can learn and you can improve. But this has been, Todd, it's been great conversation. I've learned a lot already, and it just got wheels spinning more and more, but which is fine. It's good because it helps me kind of get going forward even more. But fifth trait of pencil leadership is that we're all created uniquely with a purpose to leave a positive mark on the world. And so when everything is said and done for you, what do you hope your positive mark is?
I think hopefully someday, and I haven't created much of this yet, but my coaching, I have a coaching business that I hope to pass this on, is to allow people to live a life that's a little more in tune with what their real objectives are. Because it took a crucible for me. I had a traumatic event in my life 10 years ago that put me in a situation, and I said, what if I had nothing to lose? Then what would I do?
Yeah.
Right. And the answer was, I would go to other countries and I would ride horses. And I thought, well, I didn't expect that. That wasn't the thing I thought I would think of. That's what I want to do with my life if I had nothing to lose. And if I can help people realize just by my story or by my coaching that they can build a life that they want. They don't have to do the things their parents wanted them to do, or they don't have to have the job or the family that their friends want them to have. They can do some work and find out what the heck they want out of life and do that. Then I feel like I've made a positive mark on the world. Just even if a handful of people start to make decisions on their own about, dreams that are authentically and sincerely theirs, then that feels like a positive impact for me.
That's awesome. And that's I commend you on that. And so I'm glad we got connected. It's always good connecting with people with that kind of mission and goal in life. And so I appreciate you being on here and sharing. Where can people find you and connect with you best so they can learn from you and maybe get your coaching?
Sure. Yeah. I've a coaching group on Facebook, which is the best place probably to reach me. It's called Real Business Coaching. It's just a Facebook group. So you can type Real Business Coaching into Facebook and find me. And I do have a website for my coaching and consulting practices. It's called beachview.biz. Beachview.biz, B-I-Z.
Perfect. Awesome. Yeah. So make sure everyone get in his group, get connected to him, check out his website, and just learn from Todd and his experience and all he brings. So you can just elevate yourself and get to that next level. But again, Todd, thank you so much for sharing and being on Pencil Leadership today.
It's been a fun process. Thanks, Chris. Nice talking to you.
And thanks so much for tuning into this episode today. If you found value at all from this episode, please leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. It just helps us get this show, these messages out in front of more people. And don't forget to share this with someone who you think could benefit from listening to as well. Now let's go out and be pencil leaders.